Welcome to Tech Explain. Today we're going to be looking at Domain 5.
Okay.
Specifically access control and single sign-on.
Sounds good.
These are concepts you encounter every single day, even if you don't realize it.
Right.
Think about how you access, different apps and services online. You probably have like a ton of different usernames and passwords.
Oh, yeah, tons.
Keeping track of them all could be a real pain.
It really can be.
What if there was a way to, access everything with just one login?
That would be fantastic.
That's the promise of single sign-on and federated identity management.
Yeah, like having a master key that unlocks all the doors in a building.
I like that.
But before we get to that, we need to understand the foundation. Access control.
Okay, so access control is the key to the kingdom, so to speak.
It is.
What is it and why is it so important?
So access control is all about protecting an organization's valuable assets,
Okay.
both physical and digital. It's like a sophisticated bouncer at an exclusive club. Carefully controlling who gets in and what they're allowed to do once they're inside.
Right.
It determines who has access to what information systems or physical locations.
Okay.
And what actions they can perform.
Gotcha.
Without its sensitive, data-critical infrastructure, even people's safety could be at risk.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal.
Big deal.
How does it actually work?
Well, at its core, every access control system is a security kernel.
Okay.
That's the heart of the system that enforces the rules.
Okay.
This kernel works on a concept called the reference monitor,
Uh-huh.
which mediates every access attempt.
Okay.
It checks if the user is authorized to access the resource and what actions they're permitted to perform.
So it's like having these security guards
Yes.
constantly checking IDs
Exactly.
and permissions for every single interaction with the system.
Precisely.
Wow.
And this constant vigilance is essential for maintaining security and preventing unauthorized access.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are the guiding principle behind effective access control? How do organizations make sure they're doing it right?
There are a few crucial principles that underpin any robust access control system.
Okay.
One of the most important is separation of duties.
Okay.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
In a bank, it would be risky to have a single teller handling both deposit and withdrawals for the same account.
Yeah.
It creates an opportunity for fraud.
Right, because that one person would have too much control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By separating those responsibilities, you reduce the risk of errors or malicious activity, like having checks and balances in place to ensure that no single person has too much power.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
So what other principles are crucial for effective access control?
Another important one is the concept of need to know,
Okay.
which focuses on restricting access to information.
Gotcha.
You only get access to the data that is absolutely necessary for your job. It's like being allowed to read certain chapters of a book, but not the entire thing.
Right.
You're only given the keys to the rooms you actually need to be in.
I like that.
Yeah.
So need to know is about limiting what information you can see.
Yes.
Is there a principle that governs what you can actually do with that information?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
It's called least privilege,
Okay.
and it focuses on restricting actions. You only get the permissions to perform the tasks required for your role.
Okay.
And nothing more.
Gotcha.
You might be able to turn the pages of a book,
Okay.
but you can't rip them out.
Right.
Yeah.
So need to know is about access to information.
Yes.
And least privilege is about what you can do with it.
Exactly. They work together to create a more secure environment.
Okay, so they're two sides of the same coin.
Two sides, same coin.
Ensuring that users have the minimum level of access
Absolutely.
necessary to perform their duties.
Yep.
I'm starting to get a better grasp on the principles.
Good.
But how do organizations actually put these principles into practice?
So there are different approaches to administering access control, each with its own pros and cons.
Okay.
One is centralized administration, where a single authority manages access for the entire organization.
Okay.
It's like having one main security desk controlling access for a large office building.
Gotcha.
It's streamlined and efficient.
Okay.
But it could create a single point of failure.
So if that central system goes down, everyone's locked out.
Precisely.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's why some organizations prefer a decentralized approach,
Okay.
where each department or unit manages its own security.
Okay.
This gives them more flexibility and control,
Uh-huh.
but it can lead to inconsistencies
Okay.
and potentially weaker overall security.
So it seems like a trade-off between control and consistency.
It often is, and
Yeah.
that's where the hybrid approach comes in,
Okay.
combining the best of both worlds.
Okay.
You have central control over overall policies and user management, but departments retain some autonomy for specific needs.
Okay.
It's like having a main security desk for the building.
Okay.
But individual departments can also have their own security measures
Right.
for specific areas.
So hybrid is like a middle ground that balances centralized control with departmental flexibility.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Now I'm curious about the actual mechanisms that make all this work.
Sure.
What are the essential services that any robust access control system relies on?
Just like a building needs doors, locks, and security guards.
Okay.
A robust access control system relies on a few key services.
Okay.
Identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability.
Okay, let's break those down.
Right.
Starting with identification.
Identification is simply stating who you are.
Okay.
It's like knocking on the door and saying, "It's me."
Gotcha.
You typically provide a username or some other identifier.
Okay, so that's just the first step.
First step.
What about authentication?
Authentication is proving that you are who you say you are.
Okay.
It's like showing your ID to the security guard to back up your claim.
So it's not enough to just say who you are, you have to actually prove it.
Exactly.
How does that work in practice?
There are three main factors used for authentication.
Okay.
Knowledge, ownership, and characteristic.
Okay, let's start with knowledge factors.
Yeah.
Those are probably the most familiar to me.
Yes, knowledge factors are things,
Okay.
like a password, a passphrase, or answers to security questions. Unfortunately, passwords are often the weakest link in the security chain.
Because they could be easily guessed or compromised.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why it's crucial to choose strong, unique passwords for each of your online accounts.
Right.
And to beware out of phishing attempts that try to trick you into revealing your credentials.
Good advice.
Thank you.
So what are ownership factors?
Ownership factors are things you have that can be used to verify your identity. Think of hard tokens, those little physical devices that generate one-time passwords.
Yeah.
Or soft token apps on your phone, like Google Authenticator.
Right.
These tokens generate codes that change constantly, making them much harder to compromise.
So instead of relying on something,
Yes.
you're using something you have to prove your identity.
Exactly.
Gotcha. What about the third factor characteristic?
Characteristic factors, also known as biometrics,
Okay.
focus on something you are, your unique physical or behavioral traits.
Like fingerprint scans and facial recognition.
Exactly.
Okay.
Those are examples of physiological biometrics, which analyze unique physical characteristics.
Gotcha.
There are also behavioral biometrics, which focus on patterns of behavior like how you walk, talk, or type.
That's fascinating.
It is.
How technology can use these unique traits to verify identity.
Yeah.
But are these systems foolproof?
No system is entirely foolproof.
Right.
Biometric systems can be vulnerable to spoofing attacks, where someone tries to trick the system with a fake fingerprint or facial image.
Right.
However, the technology is constantly improving,
Okay.
and biometrics are becoming an increasingly popular and reliable method of authentication.
So we've got knowledge ownership and characteristic factors.
Yes.
Can these be combined for even stronger authentication?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Using two or more different factors is called multi-factor authentication.
Okay.
And it significantly increases security.
Gotcha.
Imagine logging into your online banking account.
Okay.
You might first enter your password, knowledge factor, and then be asked to enter a code sent to your phone, ownership factor.
Right.
That's multi-factor authentication in action, adding an extra layer of protection.
It makes sense to combine these factors to create a more robust security barrier.
It does.
So we've covered identification and authentication.
Yes.
What's the next step in this access control journey?
The next step is authorization,
Okay.
which determines what you're allowed to do once you've been authenticated. It's like the bouncer at the club telling you where you can and can't go once you're inside.
So authorization defines your specific permissions and access rights within the system.
Precisely.
Gotcha.
It ensures that you only have access to the resources and functionality that are relevant to your role and responsibilities.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want someone with guest privileges
Right.
having access to sensitive administrative functions.
Exactly.
How is authorization typically managed?
There are several different philosophies and methods for managing authorization.
Okay.
One common approach is discretionary access control,
Okay.
where the owner of a resource decides who has access to it and what they can do.
Okay.
It's like the owner of a house deciding who gets a key and whether they can use the kitchen or just the guest room.
Okay, so the owner of the data or systems has the final say on who gets access and what they can do with it.
Exactly.
Okay, and within discretionary access control,
Yes.
there are different methods for defining access rules.
There are.
Okay, there's rule-based access, which uses a simple list of rules, and role-based access,
Right.
where roles are created with specific permissions.
Uh-huh.
And users are assigned to those roles based on their job functions.
Exactly.
So with role-based access, you're essentially grouping permissions together.
Yes.
And then assigning those permission sets to users based on their job functions.
Precisely. It simplifies administration and ensures consistency in access rights for people with similar roles.
Makes sense.
And there are different levels of role-based access control, ranging from basic implementations to more sophisticated systems that manage access across an entire organization.
And what about attribute-based or context-based access control?
Yeah.
I've heard those terms as well.
Those are interesting approaches that take into account various attributes and contextual factors to make more dynamic authorization decisions. They might consider things like the user's location, the time of day, the device they're using, or even the sensitivity of the data being accessed. For instance, you might have different access permissions depending on whether you're connecting from the office network or a public Wi-Fi hotspot.
Right. That's a really smart approach.
It is.
Adding another layer of security by considering the context of the access attempt.
Exactly.
So if discretionary access control is about the owner deciding, what are the other philosophies?
There's non-discretionary access control where someone other than the owner, like an IT administrator, decides who gets access.
Gotcha.
And then there's mandatory access control, which is the most restrictive. In this model, the system itself, based on predefined rules and security clearances, decides who gets access to what. Regardless of who owns the data.
So it's like a top-down approach where security policies dictate access.
Yes.
Regardless of who owns the data.
Precisely.
That sounds incredibly strict.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's typically used in environments with very sensitive data, like government or military systems where security is paramount.
I could see how that level of control would be necessary in those situations.
Yeah.
So we've covered identification, authentication, and authorization.
We have.
What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The final piece is accountability. Making sure everyone is responsible for their actions.
Gotcha.
It's the cornerstone of any effective access control system. And it relies on detailed logging and monitoring to track who accessed what, when, and what actions they performed.
So it's not enough to just control access. You need to know who did what and when.
Exactly.
Just in case something goes wrong.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Accountability is essential for investigations, compliance, and maintaining overall security. It ensures there's a clear audit trail for all activities.
It's like having a security camera that records everything that happens.
Yes.
Providing evidence if there's ever a need to investigate an incident.
Exactly.
So we've gone through all the main components of access control.
We have.
Identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability.
Yep.
What about session management?
Yes.
Where does that fit in?
Session management is an important aspect that kicks in once you've been authenticated and authorized. It's all about ensuring that your session, your interaction with the system, is secure and protected.
So it's like making sure that once you're in the club, no one can steal your wristband.
Yes.
And pretend to be you.
A perfect analogy.
I try.
Session hijacking, where an attacker takes over your session, is a real threat, especially in sensitive environments like online banking.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
What can be done to mitigate that risk?
There are various ways to protect against session hijacking, like using secure connections, HTTPS, enforcing strong session timeouts, and educating users about the risks of phishing attacks.
So session management is all about protecting the integrity and confidentiality of your interactions with a system once you're logged in.
Precisely.
Gotcha.
It works in conjunction with all the other access control mechanisms we've discussed to create a comprehensive security framework.
That's a lot to think about.
It is.
But very important.
Very important.
Thank you for breaking that down for me.
You're welcome.
I think I'm starting to get a better understanding of how all of this fits together.
Good.
It's like a complex puzzle.
It is.
With all these interlocking pieces.
Lots of pieces.
But each piece plays a critical role in ensuring the overall security of a system.
Every single piece is important.
So what's next on our access control adventure?
Well, now that we have a good understanding of the fundamentals, let's shift our focus to a concept that many people find very user-friendly.
All right, let's do it.
Or SSO.
Ah, yes, the dream of only needing to remember one password for everything.
Yes.
I think most people would love that.
Absolutely. SSO and its close relative Federated Identity Management, or FIM, are all about streamlining access, making life easier for users, and still maintaining security. They both allow users to access multiple systems using only one set of credentials.
It sounds like having one master key that opens multiple doors.
That's a great way to think about it.
I like that.
SSO is usually used within a single organization.
Okay.
Imagine arriving at work, logging into your company's network once in the morning, and then being able to access all your work applications throughout the day without having to re-enter your username and password.
That sounds incredibly convenient.
It is.
What makes SSO possible?
One of the key technologies behind SSO is Kerberos,
Okay.
a network authentication protocol that uses tickets to grant access to various services within a network.
Tickets?
Yes.
Like for a concert or a movie?
You can think of it that way.
Okay.
Imagine a Kerberos ticket as a digital pass. Verifying your identity and granting access to specific services.
Okay.
Like showing your backstage pass to access different areas at a concert venue.
Okay, I see the analogy.
Okay.
How does this ticket system work?
Let's break it down.
Okay.
When you want to use a service protected by Kerberos, you first send a request to the Key Distribution Center, or KDC.
Okay.
The KDC is the central authority that manages authentication and issues tickets.
Okay.
You could think of it as the box office where you get your tickets.
Okay, and what happens at this box office?
The KDC has two main services, the authentication service and the ticket granting service.
Okay.
First, you authenticate yourself with the authentication service. This is you proving you are who you say you are.
Right.
If this is successful, you receive a ticket granting ticket, or TGT.
Okay.
This is your initial pass that confirms your identity within the Kerberos realm.
So it's akin your general admission ticket.
Yes.
Okay, what do you do with the TGT?
You take that TGT to the ticket granting service and present it along with your request to access a specific service.
Okay.
The TGT is like a voucher that allows you to request these specific service tickets.
So you are saying, I have my general admission ticket now. I would like access to the VIP area, please.
That's it.
I like it.
The ticket granting service checks your TGT,
Okay.
verifies you have permission to access the service you are requesting, and if everything is okay, it will issue a service ticket.
Okay.
This service ticket is your pass to use that specific service or application.
Then you take this service ticket to the application.
Yes.
And a granted entry.
Exactly.
It all sounds very efficient.
It is.
Is there anything else about Kerberos we should know?
One important point is that traditionally, Kerberos relies solely on symmetric encryption.
Okay.
This means that the same secret key is used to both encrypt and decrypt messages.
But wouldn't that mean the secret key needs to be shared?
It does.
Between the user, the KDC, and all the services?
You are right.
Yeah.
That can be a potential security vulnerability. If that one key is compromised, it puts the entire system at risk.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
There have been extensions to Kerberos, such as Sesame, which use both selectric and asymmetric encryption to address this issue.
That makes sense. I remember that with asymmetric encryption, different keys are used to encrypt and decrypt data.
Yes.
That seemed like a more secure approach.
It is much safer because you don't have to share that one secret key with so many systems.
Right.
It's especially important when dealing with a large number of users and services, as it takes away the need to distribute and manage a massive number of secret keys.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Good.
So far, we have discussed SSO within one organization.
Yes.
What about accessing systems across different organizations? That's where federated identity management comes in, right?
Exactly. FM expands on the idea of single sign-on.
Okay.
It allows you to use the credentials from one organization to access services offered by another organization.
Okay.
Think about using your Google account to log in to websites and services all over the internet.
I do that all the time.
Right.
Creating separate accounts for everything would be a nightmare.
You are right. It is much easier.
Yeah.
HEM eliminates the need to have multiple usernames and passwords for different platforms.
Right.
However, enabling access across different organizations requires trust.
That makes sense. You wouldn't give the keys to your house to just anyone.
Right.
So how does FEM establish that trust?
It depends on a three-way trust relationship between the user, the identity provider, and the service provider.
Okay, let's break that down.
All right.
The user is the person trying to access the service, correct?
Correct.
Okay, the identity provider is the entity that authenticates the user.
Yes.
And verifies their identity to others. This could be a company network.
Yes.
Your Google account.
Right.
Or any other trusted source.
Exactly.
And the service provider is the website or application the user wants to access.
That is right.
Okay.
The service provider needs to trust the identity provider's authentication process before granting access to its resources.
Gotcha.
You can think of it like a hotel accepting a passport from a foreign country as valid identification.
So FEM builds bridges of trust between organizations.
Yes.
To enable users to access services seamlessly and securely.
Exactly.
Okay, there are protocols that specifically enable this trust and communication between the involved parties.
Right.
One of the most critical protocols is SAML.
Yes.
Which stands for Security Assertion Markup Language.
That's correct.
That sounds very technical.
It's not as complex as it sounds.
Okay, good.
Think of SAML as a standardized language that allows different systems to exchange authentication and authorization data securely.
Okay.
It uses digital tokens to carry information about the user's identity and permissions.
So it's like a digital passport verifying who you are and what you are allowed to do.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, good.
These SAML tokens contain assertions,
Okay.
statements about your identity attributes and access rights. These assertions are written in XML, a common data format used for exchanging information between systems.
It sounds like a standardized form that different systems can understand.
Exactly.
Even if their underlying technology is completely different.
You are absolutely right.
Okay.
SAML is a widely adopted standard that plays a crucial role in ensuring single sign-on and federated access work across different organizations.
Besides SAML, are there any other protocols used in federated access?
There are a few others to be aware of.
Okay.
One is WS Federation, similar to SAML, but more commonly found in Microsoft environments.
Gotcha.
It offers both authentication and authorization capabilities.
Okay.
Then there's OpenID, primarily focused on authentication, confirming who you are. And finally, there's OAuth, specifically designed for authorization, granting access to specific resources or actions.
It sounds like a whole team of protocols working together.
It is.
Each with its specialty.
Yes.
To enable users to securely and simply access resources across organizational boundaries?
You could definitely see it that way.
Okay.
They all play a role in the ever-changing world of federated identity and access management.
Right. I think we need to pause here.
Okay.
And pick this up in the next part.
Sounds good.
This is a lot of really good information.
It is.
And I'm sure our listeners will want some time to digest it all.
Absolutely.
So until next time.
See you then.
Stay curious and stay safe.
You too.
Okay, so we left off talking about all these different protocols.
You did.
Used in federated access.
Right.
Like SAML, WS, Federation, OpenID, Auth.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of.
It is a lot.
But it's fascinating how they all work together
Yes.
to enable this seamless and secure access across organizations.
So can we dive a little deeper into how these protocols actually function?
Sure, let's take SAML as an example.
Okay.
Remember we talked about those digital tokens that act like passports?
Right, the ones that verify your identity and permission.
Exactly. So these SAML tokens are exchanged between the identity provider and the service provider.
Okay.
To grant you access to the service you're trying to use.
So it's like the identity provider is vouching for you to the service provider.
Yeah, you could say that.
Saying, hey, this person is who they say they are and they're allowed to be here.
Exactly. And the service provider trusts the identity provider enough to grant you access based on that token.
So it's all about trust.
Trust is crucial in federated identity management.
Makes sense.
Without trust, the whole system falls apart.
So how does this SAML token exchange actually happen?
Well, let's say you want to access a web application that uses your Google account for login. You click on the Login with Google button.
Right, I do that all the time.
That's the start of the SAML flow.
Okay.
The web application, which is the service provider in this case, redirects you to Google's login page, which is the identity provider.
Gotcha.
You enter your Google credentials, username and password.
Right.
If your credentials are correct, Google, which is the identity provider, creates a SAML token containing assertions about your identity and any necessary attributes.
So it's like packaging up your identity information.
Exactly. Putting it in a secure digital envelope.
Gotcha.
This token is then sent back to the web application, the service provider. The service provider validates the token, making sure it came from a trusted identity provider.
Right. It needs to make sure it's not a fake passport.
Precisely. And if everything checks out, it grants you access to the application.
So all of this happens behind the scenes.
Yes. Most of the time, you don't even realize this exchange is taking place.
It's like magic.
It is quite seamless.
You just click a button and boom, you're in.
That's the beauty of single sign-on and federated identity management.
It makes life so much easier.
Definitely from a user perspective.
But there's still a lot of complexity happening in the background.
Absolutely. Security and convenience are always a balancing act.
So we've talked about how SAML works.
We have.
What about these other protocols like WS Federation, OpenID, and OAuth?
They each have their own nuances and use cases. But they all share the same goal.
Which is?
Streamlining access and improving security by enabling trust and communication between different systems.
So it's like a team effort.
Exactly. Different protocols working together to achieve a common objective.
This is really fascinating stuff.
It is.
It's amazing how much technology is involved in something as simple as logging into a website.
It's all about creating a secure and seamless experience for users.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up this part of our discussion.
Sounds good to me.
We've covered a lot of ground so far.
We have.
From the basics of access control to the intricacies of single sign-on and federated identity management.
It's been a great conversation.
It has, and I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more.
I hope so.
So we'll continue our exploration of this fascinating topic in the next part.
I'm looking forward to it.
Until then, stay curious and stay safe.
You too.
So we've spent this whole time talking about access control, single sign-on, federated identity management.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is a lot, but it's also incredibly fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. It's a crucial aspect of our digital lives.
It really is.
Whether we realize it or not, these mechanisms are constantly working behind the scenes to protect our data and ensure that only authorized users can access sensitive information.
And as we rely more and more on online services,
yes,
for banking, work, entertainment,
everything, it becomes even more critical to understand these concepts.
It's amazing to think about, all of this complex technology operating silently in the background.
It really is.
We often take it for granted.
I know.
The level of sophistication involved in securing our online activity.
Yeah, it really highlights the incredible work of security professionals and the evolution of technology that we've made. It's just amazing that we can have such a high level of security without sacrificing user convenience.
Right.
But it's important to remember that security is an ongoing process, not a destination.
Right. It's not like you reach a point and then you're done.
No, it's a continuous journey.
Right.
Hackers are constantly developing new methods for bypassing security measures.
That's a little bit scary.
It is, but it's the reality.
So what can we as individuals do to stay ahead of the curve?
Well, awareness is key.
Okay.
By understanding how these different access control mechanisms and authentication methods work, you can make informed decisions about your own online security practices.
So it's not just about blindly trusting the systems.
No, not at all.
We need to understand the principles behind them.
Yes.
And take an active role in our digital security.
Absolutely.
So what are some practical steps people can take?
Well, for starters, choose strong, unique passwords for each of your online accounts.
That's a good one.
And enable multi-factor authentication wherever it's available.
Right, that adds an extra layer of protection.
Exactly. Be cautious about phishing emails and suspicious links.
Oh yeah, those could be tricky.
They can.
It's easy to fall for them if you're not careful.
Exactly.
So it's all about being proactive and vigilant.
Precisely.
In our digital interactions.
And staying informed.
Right.
Because technology is constantly evolving.
And so are the threats.
Unfortunately, yes.
But that also means there are always new and innovative security solutions being developed.
That's the exciting part. For example, biometric authentication is becoming increasingly popular, offering both convenience and enhanced security.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
I know. It's amazing how far we've come.
But as we embrace these advancements,
yes,
we also need to consider the ethical implications.
You are absolutely right.
Right. It's not just about the technology itself.
No.
It's about how it's used and the potential impact it can have on society.
We need to strike a balance between security, privacy, and individual rights.
Exactly. Technology should empower us.
Yes.
Without infringing on our freedoms.
It's a complex and ever-changing landscape.
It really is.
But by understanding these fundamental concepts, we can navigate the digital world with confidence and awareness.
And make informed choices about our online security and privacy.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation.
I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
As we explored the fascinating world of access control, single sign-on, and federated identity management.
It's been great.
It has. And until next time, stay curious.
Stay haze.
And stay secure.